And so this is a special session hosted by General Assembly and Atmel, and it's focusing on Internet of Things security, protecting your customers, company, and brand. So if you want to learn more about us and connect with us, we have a Twitter handle. Yes. We have a Twitter handle at IoT Central. You can connect with us on Facebook. We post all of our events. We post all of our events on our Meetup group. So if you haven't registered as a member, please log in. We have over 2,000 members right now, so if anyone who's not on board, please do join. You can also view the past events. We tape these on YouTube, including tonight's event. And if you have any further questions, please email Mitchell, the primary organizer, at this email. So the agenda is a little shifted today, so I'll try to go through the intro part as quickly as possible. The two main speakers tonight one is Dan from Atmel, and Atmel is a leader in IoT, in an IoT space. They build microcontrollers and radios, Wi-Fi, BLE, and so forth. And Dan specifically, he's been working at Atmel for 23 years, and his current focus right now is on cryptography. And he's stressed that tonight's event isn't just about IoT security from an Atmel perspective, but more importantly, it's IoT security in general. So I think that should be very exciting. And then we'll have some time for Q&A, and then we'll want to hear about the non-technical side, specifically the legal perspective on IoT security. So Kenneth, Rashbaum from Barton will also give the talk. And we'll end the event. We typically hold, at the end of the event, we leave several minutes for member announcements. So this is time, if you have anything to announce related to IoT, jobs, you're giving out jobs or want jobs, giving out cars or want cars, anything you want, this is time to announce it. And then a little bit more networking, and then that's all, folks. So IoT Central, very quickly, our mission over the past several months that we've been doing this is to engage the local community of entrepreneurs, investors, professionals, and enthusiasts in New York City as well as worldwide who are interested in Internet of Things. And once again, we really want to thank Atmel, Barton, and General Assembly. And in case you didn't know, this event isn't just taped, it's actually live streamed tonight, thanks to Jolly in the back. He's the VP of Internet Society, and the platform that we're hosting this live streaming is Livestream. So thank them for all of the support. So these are some pictures of the previous NIC IoT events we've organized in the past. Our first one was June 2014, and since then, we're actually the top 10 IoT-focused meetup groups globally with over 2,000 members right now. And one of the things we're really excited and passionate about is getting people together from different disciplines. One of the most important things. Absolutely. Great, thanks. One of the most important things with IoT is that it's a very interdisciplinary field. So we have people who come to our events and people who work on IoT come from all sorts of backgrounds: software, hardware, UX, graphics design, business, investors, and the people who come from professional fields, both in large corporations as well as small, and also in academia. I myself just graduated recently without a job, so I guess I have my foot in both categories. This is a little bit more information. I'll just keep this here at the end, so you guys can sort of keep this in the back of your mind. And without any further ado, let's get Atmel started.
Hello. Okay, we're back on track. Sorry about that. What's a meeting without a technical difficulty, right? All right, so we're here to talk about crypto-authentication and crypto communication and protecting your brand with CAA. But first, what I'd like to do is just say a couple of things about Atmel. We are one of the world's leading suppliers of microcontrollers. Those of you using microcontrollers already know that. We are dominant in the industrial embedded space, robotics, quadcopters, 3D printers, appliances above and below the counter, I'm sorry, I don't know what, speak up or go closer.
If you talk right into the top of the mic, it's designed to talk at the top of the mic, not sideways. No,
okay, sorry, I don't usually use one of these. So did you hear what I was saying before that?
We did. They may not. Atmel rocks.
Atmel rocks, exactly. So we're one of the world's #1 suppliers for microcontrollers in robotics, industrial embedded, 3D printers, quadcopters, appliances above and below the counter, automotive, you name it. We're also a leader in IoT. We dominate in smart energy and lighting, and we have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and all this other good stuff. And one of the fundamental technologies that is really needed in the IoT market is crypto communication and crypto authentication. We've all heard the stories over the past few years of companies being broken into. A major company was broken into through their HVAC system. So the IoT system that was running their HVAC, they used that as a tunnel into their main network.
Shouldn't have even connected.
So the goals of this presentation, there's usually a lot of trepidation when we talk about crypto, because a lot of the books you'll pick up they're filled with math. They're filled with cipher math. They're filled with random number generator. How you get the randomness of the numbers. I'm not going to go into that kind of stuff here. We're going to provide a general understanding of cryptography, and it's for non-mathematicians. We're going to examine cryptography in the context of providing a secure system. So I'm going to give you a solution for, if you're making an IoT-based product, I'm going to give you a very inexpensive yet world-class crypto solution to protect yourself, your customers, and your brand. So we're going to look at it from a 10,000-foot level, and we're going to leave the math proofs to the mathematicians. So there's a couple of basic terminology things that, for those of you that might not be so involved with cryptography that we need to go over. The function of cryptography is twofold. One is to authenticate a message, make sure that message is what it claims to be, to disguise or encrypt the confidential data. The data to be disguised is called plain text. So plain text goes into this thing, and what comes out is ciphertext or a cryptogram. The set of rules used to encrypt these messages is called an encryption algorithm. And this is typically an industry standard algorithm that's published. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows exactly how it works. And really what makes that algorithm uniquely able to encrypt a message is a session key that's used with the algorithm. And then the reverse function is called, of course, a decryption algorithm. And it also uses a session key. And that session key could actually be the same key, or it could be a different one, but that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So the agenda for today is I'm going to tell you what it is and why you need it, how it works, and how to employ it in your systems. So what we do is we call it CIA. The purpose of cryptography is confidentiality and privacy. You want to ensure that no one can read the message except the intended receiver. Integrity is assuring the received message is not altered in any way. Authentication is proving that in fact it's what it's declared to be. And non-repudiation is actually a higher level of authentication. It's whoops. It's a little, it's a more robust authentication. Really at the bottom here it says, the message could have been sent from nowhere else and from nobody else. So that you can authenticate a message to make sure it's from the right party, maybe the right company, but then you can really get to non-repudiation where it's absolutely from that source. So why you need crypto authentication? Ecosystem control. You want to prove your components and disposables are genuine. So one place that crypto is used a lot is in the printer industry. The printer cartridges have crypto devices on board, and they can authenticate that it's their printer, or licensed. It's a printer cartridge from a licensed supplier, because their model is they sell the printer for very cheap, and their income stream comes from these cartridges. So they don't want somebody to just start making these cartridges willy-nilly and selling them into their market, and they lose money. So you don't want to do that. So to prove your components, you can use one of these devices. You want to ensure a clearance level or access level of clients, so you can have different levels of access into a system. The control delivered services. You can enable standard, mid-level, premium features, like if you can imagine a washing machine, a Wi-Fi connected washing machine. Washing machine companies want to have Wi-Fi on their washing machines because they don't have any insight into their end clients, right? They sell them through some store, and you come and pick up your washing machine, take it home, and the washing machine company doesn't know who you are, not unless you fill out the little card and go for a warranty. But with a Wi-Fi connected washing machine, a whole new world of income opens up. Now you can register using Wi-Fi, and they can see how often you use, say, the delicate cycle. And they can send you an email saying, hey, customer, how would you like to have for a small fee the next level of washing machine? Maybe you bought the base washing machine. You say, oh, I see that you're using delicate a lot. We have another washing machine that has 2 versions of delicate. And then for like another $100, you can get the mid-level washing machine, even though you walked out of the store with the base brand. Things like that. Also warranty, control warranty, and annual subscriptions to services, all kinds of things that you need authentication for. You want to secure your code from hacking. You want to make sure that your boot is genuine. So your device is going to be in the hands of somebody else. And at some point, the device is going to be off. So they could easily try to reflash one of the microcontrollers, replace parts, do that kind of thing. But with this type of device, you can actually make sure that the boot is the same. You can actually you can get a fingerprint of the entire boot image and say, okay, well and it's a unique fingerprint, and that image is going to be, it will assure that the boot has been unaltered. And then there's a design firmware upgrade. Downloads are genuine and unmodified. So what happens if you have a device out in the field and you want to do a firmware upgrade? You want to make sure that the image coming in is actually what it claims to be. You don't want somebody to intercept your connection to your end product and then stuff in a different firmware that might be able to give them control of your system. So as the firmware is downloaded, you can again take a fingerprint of it and then match that to the fingerprint it's supposed to be. And security for today's messages that will protect into the future. It's called perfect forward security, or secrecy. You can imagine you want to make sure your communications today are secure, but what if you make something that has a video feed from someone's home? They want that video feed to be secure today, and 10 years from now, when they throw out their device or do whatever and somebody has access to it and they can maybe try to go in there and get those session keys and be able to get, or somehow, a number of different ways that your secret keys could be exposed over time. You don't want that to happen because they don't want those videos to be unlocked 10 years from now or 20 years from now. So we offer something called perfect forward security. And hardware security protects the system from cloners. Firmware and hardware can be linked so that it would be very difficult for somebody to simply take your schematic and your bill of materials and steal your firmware to make a clone. So that would be very, very difficult. Recent HP study revealed that 70% of IoT devices have serious vulnerabilities. This is a fairly recent, maybe mid-last year assessment. Investigators at a recent Black Hat conference demonstrated that even USB firmware is open to hacking. And even countries are heavily involved in this. So every country now seems to have some kind of cyber army unit. And if you look them up, they all really love eagles. Just something I noticed. So in 2014 in review, the past performance is a predictor of future returns in this case, right? In 2014, we saw an unprecedented increase in attacks, and it's been all over the paper. You know, cyber attacks and their victims have become topics in the press like crazy. And in this case, the public is very aware. In fact, these are 2 images that went around the social media cycle quite a lot. And these are 2 high-quality brands, and they can survive this kind of ridicule. But you know, as a startup, can your brand survive that? So prior to 2014, most companies were in total denial of this, but now that everything's getting into the papers and it's becoming really one of the top spots in everybody's minds, they're starting to get involved with security. But it's really not enough. If you look at the graph here, you can see that secure nodes are still are not outpacing insecure nodes. People are trying to save money and really putting all their customers and their own companies at risk. But this should get people to listen. A U.S. district court ruled in New Jersey saying the FTC can sue companies over data breach. So the decision assigns corporate responsibilities for inadequate data security measures. The information security affects the financial well-being of individuals and needs to be controlled. Board and executive management can no longer ignore the topic. And they also want proper technological controls to be put in place. The FTC had a workshop on IoT, and they made a report in January. And these are
Makes good reading.
yes, it does make good reading. I went back. So these are some of the quotes. Companies should build security into their devices at the onset rather than as an afterthought. So they are urging companies to conduct a privacy or security risk assessment, minimize the data they collect, and testing their security measures before launching the product. They're suggesting a implementation of defense in depth. Just relying on HTTPS is no longer an adequate solution. Saying, oh, I have, I'm going to use a secure connection. Companies should consider implementing reasonable access control measures to limit the ability of unauthorized persons to access customers' devices. So more quotes. The staff agrees it is great potential for innovation in IoT, and specific legislation at this stage would be premature. But they also agree that they feel the industry itself should monitor itself. And in light of the ongoing threats, they're also suggesting that Congress enact strong, flexible, and technology-neutral legislation to strengthen the existing data security enforcement tools. So they're asking for enhanced powers to go after those people who are not doing the right thing. So the markets adopting crypto authentication is essentially all of them. There is no connected market that's not adopting crypto authentication. It's probably one of the hottest topics at the moment. So now we're going to dive into how it works. And so the only thing I ask is that you pay attention, because it's not very technically difficult, but the concept grows over each slide. So there are three common schemes. One is a hash function, and it's also known as a message digest or one-way encryption. It's strong by itself, and it's also a fundamental building block of cryptography. There's secret key cryptography, which is also known as symmetric cryptography. It's stronger. And we have public key cryptography, which is known as asymmetric or public-private key cryptography, and that's really the strongest. So let's first talk about hash messages. A hash uses a mathematical transformation which is irreversible. If you're familiar with a CRC, cyclic redundancy character, or an MD5, if you downloaded firmware for a phone or something, you'd see an MD5 fingerprint of the firmware. What that does is it guarantees that the image that you're pulling down is really the image that you wanted. So what they'll do is they'll publish a firmware image, and they'll do a hash, an MD5. You'll download it, you'll run your own MD5, and make sure that hash matches where you got it from. And now you know you absolutely got the firmware that you wanted. Except that MD5 is broken, and CRC is a non-crypto hash. So neither of these things are going to protect anything. So you can consider it a fingerprint of a file. So a crypto hash uses a random seed, or sometimes it's called a salt, and a very strong algorithm. So it's easy to compute the digest of a given message, but it's infeasible to generate a message with a given digest. So if you had a hash of a file and you were trying to manipulate that file to have the same hash, you cannot do it. It's just not going to happen. It's infeasible to modify a message without changing the digest. It's infeasible to find different messages in the same digest, with the same digest. So it's just essentially impossible. In the crypto world, nobody ever says impossible, they say infeasible.
So difficult.
Yes. When used to authenticate, the result is often called a MAC. A MAC is called a message authentication code. The process referred to is a MAC function, and when a hash algorithm is used to create a MAC, it's called an HMAC. All right, so that's hash. And let's talk about secret key cryptography, symmetric cryptography. This is like you have a single key for both encryption and decryption, and it's like I have a lockbox and I have two keys, and I give one to you, and I keep one. And now you fly to California. So then I can send you the box, I can lock some secret in it, lock the box, send it to you, and then you can open it out in California. And you know, because you're the only person who can open that box, you know the secret has not been compromised. The problem with this is getting the key to you. Now, if you and I are here, now I can give you the key, and you know, I know I gave you the key, you know, but what happens if you live in California and I always live in New York and we never see each other? I have to send you the key somehow, and it could be intercepted, and there's a vulnerability there. Also, what happens if I really respect the key and my ability to send important messages, and you don't really respect it as much, and you don't keep that key as secure as I do? That's also a major vulnerability. So the vulnerability is the confidentiality of the key. So let's use crypto hash and symmetric authentication, or in symmetric authentication. So here's the situation. You want to authenticate a connection to me. You and I share a secret key. So you create a random number, random seed, a salt for another word, and I get that number from you. You send it in the clear. This is a 256-bit random number with high randomization. There are lots and lots of entropy is what it's called in the industry. So it's a very random number, and 256 bits is, just to give you an idea, it's like more atoms that are in the universe. It's really difficult. So we each have that key, we take that same random number, and we run it through a hash, a crypto hash, and we wind up getting the same number. Well, we should get the same number. I send back the number to you, and you say, okay, the response, so I know whoever I'm talking to has that number, so it must be me. So with secret key cryptography, now you want to send me a message. So now I've authenticated that you're you. Now I want to send you a message. So what I'll do is you'll send me a salt, and we'll use that same MAC function, but now instead of sending the number back, I'll keep this number secret. I'll keep that resulting number secret. You'll keep that resulting number secret. Now it's our secret session key. Nobody else has this. And what we'll do is we'll use a microcontroller or a microprocessor that has an encryption engine on it, and plain text goes in, it gets encrypted, it becomes ciphertext, it gets to me, I decrypt it, it becomes plain text. And now I know that two things. One, first I authenticated that it was you, and now I've gotten a secret message, and anybody who was standing in between that may have been eavesdropping doesn't know this is just a randomized number stream. They don't know what it is. So, so that's hash and secret key. Are there any questions on hash or secret key? Pretty clear? Great. So then we have public key cryptography. This is the asymmetric. This is the most powerful, the strongest. So this uses two mathematically related keys for encryption and decryption. It's the most secure, but far slower than symmetric. Hardware acceleration is recommended, so you have a little hardware authentication device that does this very, very quickly. Asymmetric cryptography is like having two different keys to a lockbox. Either one of them can lock the box, but only the first key can unlock the box if the second key locked it, and vice versa. All right? So say, you know, you and I have 2 keys. Or if you take your key and lock the box, you know, you're in New York, you're in California, I'm in New York, you lock that same box. You can't unlock it and say, oh, I forgot something. You can't unlock it. You've locked it. It's done. Your key will not unlock it. You have to send that box to me, and only I can unlock it. And vice versa. If I lock the box and sent it to you, you would be the only one to be able to unlock it. I can't unlock it, even though I locked it. That's the whole beauty of asymmetric cryptography, and we'll get into how it's used. So key distribution suddenly becomes easy because one key can be shared publicly, and that's why it's called public key. So I'm going to have 2 mathematically related keys with the characteristics which we just went over. One of those keys I am going to keep behind guns, guards, and dogs. It's not going to be shared. I'm going to keep it. The other one is to go out to the public. It could be on my Facebook page, because what are you going to do with it? You're going to lock messages? Great. I'm the only one on the planet that can unlock them. So that's fine. And then all of you will have public-private keys. So if I want to send a message to you, I will use your public key to lock the message and send it to you, knowing that you are the only person on the planet who can unlock it. And vice versa. If you want to send a message back to me, you'll use my public key. And my public key could be readily, I could give it to you, send it to you. You could read it on my Facebook page, go to some secure site that you absolutely trust to get it. Sometimes they're called, or they are called certificate authorities, like VeriSign, right? Things like that. So key distribution is easy, and so on. So asymmetric cryptography is the future, and it's just sort of like, you know, MIT says it's the future. This guy, Nick Sullivan, who worked at Atmel for most of the important cryptography efforts, says it's the future. It really is the future. Just to give you an idea, there's previous to ECC, there was something called RSA, or RSA is very dominant right now, but everyone's going to ECC. RSA, if you compare it against ECC, a 256-bit ECC number is equivalent to a 3,000-bit RSA number. ECC is that much stronger. So, public-private key, asymmetric authentication. Let's see how that works. So again, you're going to send me a salt. You're going to send me a random number, and I'm going to get it from you. And then what I'm going to do is, with my private key, I'm going to sign that number. And then I'm going to send that digital signature, that's what's called a digital signature when I do that, back to you. You're going to use my public key to verify that signature. So then you'll be able to say yes or no, it's me. Again, remember, with public-private key, one key locks, the other key is the only thing that can unlock. So when I lock something with my private key, the only thing that can unlock is with my public key. So sending a message with a public key is, well, first you start off with my public key, a random session key. It's a random number you come up with, 256 bits, and plain text that you're going to send. First thing you do is you encrypt the random session key with the public key. So now you have an encrypted session key. Then you encrypt the plain text with that random session key that you picked, and you have a ciphertext. So now you have this digital envelope in which you have, it could be an email or whatever, you have an encrypted session key and ciphertext. You send that to me. I get it. I use my private key to decrypt the session key. I'm the only person on the planet who could do that. Random session key then decrypts the ciphertext, and I get the plain text. So in one shot, what we've done is made sure that we've authenticated who each other is, and we have the data sent securely.
Can you go that slide one more time?
Sure. Which part?
Just take it from the top.
Take it from the top. Okay. So we start off. So you're going to send. So you want to send me a secure message, and both you and I have our own public-private keys. So what we do is we start off with my public. You start off with my public key. A random session key. You just decide that I'm going to use this 256-bit random number to encrypt the plain text. So what you do is you take that random session key and you encrypt it with my public key. And I get an encrypted session key. You take the random session key that you have and you encrypt the plain text to ciphertext. And then you send that to me. So now I'm going to have this ciphertext and I'm going to have this locked up session key. First, I take a look at the session key and I unlock it with my private key. Because remember, you locked it with my public key. So the private key unlocks it. I then have my random session key. I then use the random session key that you had selected and decrypt the ciphertext you sent. So now I have the plain text. And because it's public-private key, and only you have the private key, or only I have the private key, and you used my public key, I know that this is, a secure communication.
Well, in fact, you should point out that the session key is actually a symmetric key. The only
Yes.
So that's the beauty, that you're doing authentication through the slow asymmetric algorithm, and you're using payload encrypting with.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. What he's pointing out is that the random session key that you used, you're sending it to me, right? This is exactly the same random session key that you sent me. So this is symmetric. This is shared keys.
Short term.
Short term. Yeah, because you know where this is going.
Well,
All right, so now the problem here is if everyone has my public key, how do I know the message came from you? Because my public key is out there. It's everywhere. It's on my Facebook page. You could just get it and send it to me and say, hey, sure, I'm Joe Smith, the guy that you want to talk to. So we use hash functions to do the authentication, make sure it's really you. And hash functions are used to create signatures and certificates. And sometimes you would have you could have these digital signatures and certificates in a trusted place, like a certificate authority, like VeriSign. So let's just talk about how you would create a signed message. We're not going to talk about encrypting the message. Let's just make believe I'm going to send you the some document, and I just want to make sure that you know that the document came from me. So, and also that the document is exactly the way I sent it. Somebody didn't intercept it in the middle of our communication, change something, and then now I have a different message. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the plain text, and I'm going to take a fingerprint using a crypto hash. Then I'm going to take you're going to do this, all right? So you're going to take the plain text and you're going to hash it, and then you're going to take your own private key and you're going to sign the fingerprint so you have a digital signature of the plain text. Then you're just going to send me the plain text, and you're just going to send this to me. Now this comes, and I get this plain text which I can read, but how do I know it hasn't been manipulated? What I do is I hash the plain text. So now I get a digital fingerprint, and then I look with your public key, I look to verify and make sure that it's the real hash. And then say yes or no that the document's been either manipulated or not. So if we put it all together, what we're going to start off with, so you're going to send me a message, and I need to assure this message came from you, and the message is totally unaltered. So this is the entire process. You're going to start off with your own, obviously you have your own private key, and you have a message called the plain text message. Then you're going to select a random session key. This is going to be our temporary session key for this communication. And you have my public key because you got it off my Facebook page. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take a fingerprint of that plain text, a representative fingerprint of the plain text, and you're going to sign it, and it's going to have a digital signature. Then you're going to take the plain text and you're going to encrypt it with the random session key and have a ciphertext. You're then going to take the random session key and you're going to encrypt that with my public key. And then we have an encrypted session key, and you're going to send it to me. Did everybody, this is kind of important, did everybody get this? Following? Okay. So then it comes, then the digital envelope comes from you to me. And the first thing I do is I decrypt the random session key. And again, as it was pointed out, this random session key is a symmetric key. It's the same key you picked that I have. Then we take that random session key and we decrypt the ciphertext. So now I have plain text. Then we take the plain text and we hash it. I hash it on my side. And I verify it against the digital signature. And say, yes, the fingerprint of this file matches. I've authenticated exactly who sent me this file, and I verified that the file has been unaltered in transit. Did everybody get that? So we can go into the rabbit hole a little bit further. That already is incredibly secure. But 2 minutes? Okay. So that already is incredibly secure. So we also you can also do something called ECDH. It's elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman. This is an anonymous key agreement that allows two parties to just know what a shared secret is. So let's say Alice and Bob have private and public pairs. If you multiply Alice's public key and Bob's private key, and the same vice versa, like a dot multiply, you wind up getting the same shared secret. This is an identity in elliptic curve mathematics. So if you have a public key and a private key, and I have a public key and a private key, we only need to know each other's public key. And we can magically create this secret this shared secret. So now sending a message using ECDH, first thing you do is you calculate the ECDH shared secret. You have a private key, you have the plain text, and the shared secret. You take the fingerprint, you sign it, there's your digital signature. You encrypt the plain text with the shared secret, and you have ciphertext. You send it to me. I calculate. I take your public key, and I magically calculate the same exact shared secret. We never sent any previous communications at all. I decrypt the ciphertext with the shared secret. I hash it. I verify it with your public key. I verify your signature. And there. So I think I'm going to, since we're getting to the end, I think we're going to leave it here. But you can see the power of this. So, are there any questions? Sure.
Does all this affect latency at all?
Well,
Can you repeat the question, please?
oh, I'm sorry. Does all of this affect latency? So if you were doing this in a software routine, it would take some time. But we suggest using hardware encryption. In fact, there's a bunch of companies, including us, that make hardware authentication devices. And these are, you could consider these hardware acceleration devices that sit right next to a microcontroller. They're incredibly inexpensive, way less than $1, and they give you world-class type of security. This is the kind of things that money is sent back and forth with. Yes.
So let me get this straight. If these devices, this hardware that you're talking about, would be something that you can install on a microchip on any device that
any microcontroller, any microprocessor, any vendor. You just it doesn't bolt actually, but it gets soldered next to.
And then it acts as the firewall sort of thing.
It acts as the authentication crypto accelerator. So the only thing the devices, there are devices that have just the authentication part, and it relies on a crypto engine that would be in a microcontroller or microprocessor, like an AES peripheral, to do your streaming communication. Or there are other devices called TPMs, Trusted Platform Modules, that actually have this embedded in the crypto engine embedded in the part as well. Now, a Trusted Platform Module might be a couple of bucks. where just an authentication device would be, way less than $1. Yes?
So the question I have is, why don't you verify the signature first? The sender is correct by the person.
Why wouldn't you verify the signature first? Because you, in this situation, what you're doing is you're actually you're signing a fingerprint of the. Let me go back.
Before I get a text from my system.
Right. So what you're doing, one of the first things you're doing is you're taking the plain text and you're taking a crypto hash of it, a fingerprint of what it is. See what? And maybe I didn't make this clear, but when you do a hash function, the hash function, if you're doing let's say a SHA-256, the result of a hash function is going to be a 256-bit word. You could send a file that's 10 megabytes through this hash function. What's going to come out on the other end is going to be just a 256-bit word. That's why they call it sometimes one-way cryptography. So what this is, it's really a 256-bit fingerprint of what that file was. And then what you're doing is you're taking that fingerprint and you're signing it with your private key. So before I can verify or authenticate who sent me this, I have to have the plain text, because I also have to take a hash of it. And then only then can I go ahead and verify that this hash is correct.
I follow that. I already have the plain text on my system.
So you already have the plain text in your system, but it might be corrupted. So yeah, that.
What's the question?
I'm not. If you send corrupted data, it's going to wind up getting corrupted to me. There's another thing with non-repudiation, as I was mentioning before, a guarantee where it came from. Whereas, like, let's say Alice was going to send an encrypted message to Bob, right? And then Bob was going to send that message on to Charlie, but Charlie doesn't trust Bob, all right? Bob can still send him Alice's message, and because of non-repudiation, Charlie will absolutely positively know that message came from Alice, even though he doesn't trust Bob at all. And he also knows that it wasn't modified. But once something gets screwed up, you can't help it. Yes?
How do you keep someone from getting a hold of the private key?
Well, that's the beauty of hardware acceleration. If you had a hardware crypto-authentication device, actually, let me just. This is a rather deep rabbit hole.
Need to desolder the chip.
Hold on, it's worse than that. So what you have is here's a representative of a block diagram of a typical crypto authentication chip. So you would have a tamper-hardened hardware boundary, which has an active shield. The active shield actually looks like this. It's a bunch of different signals that are sitting right on top of the chip, and cut any one of those signals, and the chip is disabled, essentially destroyed. So there's a lot of crypto devices out there that look like this, and they can easily be probed. All you have to do is get die probing equipment. But yes.
Does this apply only to discrete messages? Can you also be applied to streaming, continuous communication?
Well, so you would use a crypto engine, like an AES engine, to do the streaming cryptography. So you would use something like this to do the authentication, and also to generate the high quality random number generator, high quality random number for the AES. One of the things that in crypto is a crypto algorithm is only as strong as the randomness of the random numbers you use. Mm-hmm. So when you're using a hardware accelerator, you can know if you go to the company, like if you came to Atmel, we could give you all kinds of information about the entropy level of this random number generator to assure you that nobody's, this is a great random number.
But how are you ensuring the entropy?
Well, that's again, if you contact us outside of this group and we sign an NDA and and we can tell you how with noise generation and deterministic random number algorithms joined together, you wind up making a high quality FIPS level certifiable random number generator. Yes?
How security issues can be solved on the devices with low resources? For example, Arduino.
How secure are Arduinos?
Yeah, how can, no, not how secure they are, because they are not secure.
Yes, yeah.
It's, how to secure them.
So how you would secure so an Arduino would actually uses Atmel microcontrollers. So you would just marry one of those microcontrollers with a crypto-authentication hardware chip, and you would send it commands to say authenticate. Here's the back and forth.
By applying additional modules.
Yeah, just a simple low pin count, like 6 pins device sitting next to it, talking to it serially.
Our final question.
Here's.
A lot of what you described has been sort of the state of the art at the internet for a long time. But there's a lot of complication, I would imagine, considering that this was all built for maybe million devices, and with internet, I think we're talking about hundreds of millions of devices. And so what are the problems that we're going to have to see when we're trying to scale all this up to work with hundreds of millions of devices and sharing hundreds of millions of keys? And who's going to be the certificate authority that's going to manage the forward protection of this information?
Really good question. All right, so one of the benefits of this type of cryptography is you can create, with digital signatures, as we discussed, you create a chain of trust. So, previously you would have to, if you're going to send out 1,000 units, you'd have to somehow, in your back room, keep a list of 1,000 serial numbers and say, okay, well, and then authenticate, versus the serial number and say, yeah, this is, I sold that device. So what you could do is have what we call a chain of trust. So you have a series of certificates and digital signatures inside the device, like that starts off with your corporation, and then goes to the manufacturing site, which then goes into the individual device. And so each layer assures you the next layer is accurate. So when you get the device, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to ask for the global signature, right? And the global signature was created by HQ, some trusted source. If you were, XYZ Corporation, you know that you would go to the XYZ Corporation website and find their certificate. And then the host asks for the local signature. So the global signature assures that the local signature is correct. The local signature assures that the individual signature is correct. So by doing this, you don't even have to track, by having this chain of trust, you don't even have to track what you're sending out there, because it's locked inside of this incredibly difficult to crack device, uncrackable, let's say. Although in the crypto world, nobody ever says anything absolute. So anybody crypto watching is going to say, anyway. So yeah, that's the way you would do it. All right, that was the last question, so I'm going to hand the puck over.
There will be a more networking session if you guys have more questions at the end. Okay, so next up, we have Kenneth from Barton Law Firm talking about the legal perspective on IoT. Yes, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
We good to go? Which one? This one? Nope, don't go. Hold on. Okay, great, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Ken Rashbaum. I'm a partner with the law firm of Barton LLP. We're proud to be a sponsor of the IoT Meetup. We've been a sponsor for quite some time. And this is a space that we want to be in. One of the things that we do as lawyers is facilitate what you all do and try to reduce some of the barriers that come between you and your product and your end service. So what we're going to spend the next couple of minutes talking about is the why of what we just heard. We just heard the how. We're now going to talk about the why and the where, which is where did we start from and how did we get here. The FTC staff report that came out in January about IoT has changed the landscape. It is now the metric by which everything that we're doing in this space is going to be measured. It is what the investors are going to be using as due diligence for how you are following the security rules. And we'll get into those in a couple of minutes because they're actually not just the US, they are becoming global. And we got to the space to a great extent because of what we have seen in the media. Now, call it what you want, but the millions of people, for example, saw the Homeland TV episode where someone got the serial number of a pacemaker, hacked into the pacemaker, texted the information, and was able to get in and make the pacemaker malfunction, and the guy died. Now, for those of you who may be thinking this is fiction, there was an ABC News broadcast showing that very episode and showing former Vice President Dick Cheney watching it and then responding that it frightened him. The man in charge of security for the United States, right? That it frightened him to the point where he had the wireless capability of his pacemaker disabled. Now, what most people didn't know is that 2 years before that, there was an attack on the system that controlled implantable devices at one of the major Harvard hospitals in Boston. It was detected and removed before anybody was actually injured. But again, it's life imitating art. Let's go back to life. The FTC's first complaint in IoT that resulted in a penalty settlement was about a video baby monitor where someone was able to get in and actually view the baby in her crib. So this is really, as I said, this is what our legislators are looking at. The Federal Trade Commission is also moving into the space in a big way because Congress is not. I don't think it'll come as any surprise to anybody that we can't expect major legislation on cybersecurity or major legislation really in anything for that matter out of this Congress for the next couple of years. So we just heard a few minutes ago that the guidelines from the staff report are calling for legislation to give the FTC authority to regulate security and privacy in the IoT space. I'm here to tell you they already have it. They already have it and have been using it. Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act states that they can regulate deceptive trade practices and unfair trade practices. In plain English, what that means is they're going to be looking to whether your security and privacy representations are accurate. And if they're not, did they cause harm? The statement that accompanied that report from the chairwoman of the FTC, Edith Ramirez, is very instructive. If consumers don't feel their information is protected, they won't embrace these devices. Translated, nobody will buy them. If nobody will buy them, nobody will invest. At my law firm, I had the privacy and cybersecurity practice. One of the things we do with startup, mid and more mature companies is to advise them on what these guidelines are so that they can create their policies and procedures to meet these particular standards. So we will interpret those rules both from the US and in Europe, and Europe is really heading the charge here, to advise on what needs to be done. That's where the encryption requirements really come from. This is the new metric for investors. Are you meeting these particular rules on information security and privacy? I'm using those two terms deliberately in this way because the preambles to all of these rules say privacy is enabled by security. And that should come as no surprise to anybody in this room. Therefore, the two things work in hand, work together. Here's the metric. Here's what the FTC is looking for. First, a written information Security and Privacy Plan, a WISP plan it's called. And they've said this very clearly. By the way, I've been attending conferences in the last couple of weeks on privacy and security, and FTC officials have been speaking at every single one of them. Think about that for a second. The government is sending out people to go into the public and speak on these conferences, and they have authority to do so and give these particular standards because they're showing that they are the new sheriff in town. They are going to be enforcing this because no other agency essentially is. The FTC officials have been saying, we are the Consumer Protection Authority. We view these IoT devices as great advances, but with great risk, and therefore it's our mandate to protect the public. First question, written information security plan, policies and procedures. Do you have them? And are they current? If there is a breach, and if nothing else, we have learned from Uber and Target and Home Depot and Neiman Marcus and JP Morgan Chase, the list goes on and on. No one is too big to be hacked. No one is too small to be hacked. And private information, personal information, is hot on the market. The organized crime has basically found that it is now the new prostitution and gambling with a hell of a lot less risk and a lot more money. Next thing they look for, and this comes right out of their audit documents, by the way, have you trained your workforce on those policies and procedures, and have you documented the training? I do a lot of work in healthcare, and there's an expression in hospitals: if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. Exactly. And that's the way the FTC looks at it. You can have the greatest culture of privacy and security. You can have the best practices, and your staff can know them backwards and forwards. If you don't document it, it doesn't exist. Next, do you have a breach readiness and response plan, and have you drilled on it? They will be looking for that as well, because the standard is not perfection. This is not a strict liability issue, as we lawyers say. The standard is that you take reasonable steps consistent with these rules and industry practices to try to prevent a breach, number one, and number two, to respond to it quickly. If you've done those things, you are in essential compliance. Have you built in security as a process? Chairwoman Ramirez has said repeatedly, we don't want to see security as an afterthought. We want to see security and privacy by design. We want to see evidence that it's baked in. And finally, oversight of your service vendors. If there's a breach, they're going to look through your entire ecosystem. If you're using a cloud provider, for example, they will look to your master services agreement with the cloud provider to see whether you exercised your due diligence to make sure that they have the appropriate security controls. Other agencies have overlapping jurisdiction too. If you're working in health IoT, one of the hottest areas, Department of Health and Human Services and the FDA have authority there. The Consumer Product Safety Commission comes into play as well, particularly if there have been injuries caused. Finally, there are state laws on how you collect data from your device, how long you keep it, and what you do with it. Massachusetts is one of the best examples. There is also a scheme in Europe. The European Union actually came out with a report very similar to the FTC staff report last year. It's called Working Document 223 from the European Commission's Working Party on Data Protection. And here are the things that they said they want to see if you're in the European Union. And by the way, all of your devices, all of your services are by definition international and under the jurisdiction of the European Union. Why? Because they can be accessed from anywhere. I do these presentations a lot. I did one for a group of federal judges at the Federal Judicial Center in Washington a couple of years ago, when the judge who introduced me said, how many of you have international disputes on your dockets? A couple of hands went up, mostly from New York and California, some from Chicago, some from Boston. The judge said, how many of you have multinational companies, global companies on your docket? Every hand of the 150 went up. The judge said, good. Pay attention to what Mr. Rashbaum is going to tell you, because it pertains to all of you, because all of your companies are global. Here is what the European Union is looking for. Notice of privacy and security protections. How are you letting the consumers know what you're doing and why and where you're keeping the data? What choice are you giving them? Opt-in or opt-out to how long the data is collected. Minimization means the smallest amount of data, and security safeguards. If this looks at all familiar, say from that slide, it's because the FTC is taking its cues from Europe. Other things they're looking for, designated person for privacy. Anybody here work in healthcare, by the way, or do anything in the healthcare space? All right, so you know that under HIPAA, the healthcare privacy law, you have to have a designated security officer. Same thing here, the FTC is looking for. Transparency, consumer choice. The FTC has been stating they are devoting more resources to IoT and will continue to do so. Compliance is increasing. Enforcement is increasing. So how do we go about mitigating risk? How do we go about mitigating risk so that investors will be more confident in your companies, so that security can be built, seen as a priority, as a first thought, not an afterthought. The metric is established by the FTC, which in turn took its cues from Europe. So to create this infrastructure, not just to prevent the government from coming after your companies, but to make you more attractive to the next round of funding, figure out what the laws and regulations are that affect what your company is doing, where they are doing it. Remember, there are state differences. California has specific rules about opt-in or opt-out for data collection. Massachusetts requires particular security levels, including encryption. And document the standards that you are doing to comply with those rules. It makes your company more attractive, it provides defensibility, and it is a holistic endeavor. It's not something that is just from your security personnel to do. It's certainly not something just the lawyers can do, and it's not something the developers can do by themselves. I spend most of my working day drafting policies and procedures and training materials for companies like yours. The one thing that's worse than having no policies or procedures or plans at all is having policies, procedures, and plans that no one follows. Because it sets, if you set a standard you can't reach, if your policies are not determined with the people who will be using the data and the devices and the services and the development on a day-to-day basis, no one will follow them. So whoever you work with should be putting together those work groups to create something that's consistent with your culture of your organization, and create reminders of training as well as to what those policies are, what the security designs are, and they're evergreen documents. They have to be alive, they have to be consistently revised, and pay attention to what is going on in these regulations, because this area is constantly changing. But with building in these provisions, you can have two things that will make your company grow. One is attractiveness, because you'll meet the metric for investment in these companies by security and privacy, which are integral parts of your service or your app. And second, you will have defensibility. There's a story making the rounds, which is true, that a company was giving bribes to Chinese officials. The company, its public information, was Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley was a subject of an investigation by the government, Department of Justice. Fines could have run into the hundreds of millions of dollars. But Morgan Stanley had set up a series of policies and procedures over the years to prevent exactly this sort of thing. They had reminder notices that popped up on people's computers. They had training drilled on internal investigations for these possibilities, and drilled again and documented the drilling. The government looked into all of that over a period of 2 years and declined to prosecute. Declined to prosecute, and published a press release on that to show the benefits of exactly this sort of compliance infrastructure. It is a tremendous return on investment. Questions? Yes? regulated by the FTC, or is the SEC separate MO? The question is the financial services industry also regulated by the FTC? And the answer is yes, with regard to what they put out as their representations on security and privacy. The financial industry is also regulated, of course, by the SEC for publicly listed companies. In New York, they're regulated by the Division of Financial Services, which, by the way, now has a cybersecurity component for all bank examinations in 2015. And one of the things they ask is, what is your due diligence for testing information security of your vendors and business partners, by the way, including law firms? Yes?
I have a company, and we do compliance work for mobile devices. And I fully acknowledge that most of my customers buy my products mostly for, lack of a better way of saying it, for CYA sort of activities. They want to be sure, just like Morgan saying, that they've done everything they have to do to prove that they're traders, bankers, investment bankers are doing the right thing. Now that's for not really trying to head off problems, but just trying to make sure when they get sued that they have all their documents lined up. But really, the elephant in the room that everyone's ignoring is email. Email is the primary vehicle for security breaches in the United States. And the FTA has done nothing about trying to go after people that are the major spammers. They don't back any legislation that would secure the internet, secure internet email. And this is, we can have public key encryption and all of this stuff all over the place. But if if I call someone in your front office and I get them to take an email from me that's infected, and I infect their entire network, all the public key encryption doesn't mean anything, because they're going to hack right in, just like that Sony situation.
Or Anthem, for that matter.
Yeah, so, but it's the elephant in the room, and everyone's ignoring that email is the vehicle for most of these hacks, or a lot of them. And nothing is being done. The FDA, I mean, I've talked to the FTC about it, and they don't want to, be bothered.
That's a great. No, that's a great point. Email is indeed one of the largest leak points, or attack points, breach points, if you will. And I was just reading something about this morning. In fact, getting ready for this, that the one way to deal with that, and something that the agencies will be looking to, and lawyers will be looking to if there's litigation based on the breach, is how have you instituted training for your staff with regard to what not to click on, with regard to not misdirecting email. There is no such thing as perfection in this space. There is no such thing as a requirement for perfection. So internal policies and procedures go along with technical encryption. I'm sure you'd agree with that. You can't really have one without the other, or the scheme doesn't work. Yeah.
So I think two things. Last question. I think that as far as one of the various culprits as far as security breaches, it is right as email and malware to the web. But there are security things that will greatly reduce that risk, even though it's not totally mandated. But the second thing I think is more important as relates to IoT is that people kind of try to confuse compliance and security. So what happens is that we can say, I'm going to do what I need to do so that if I get sued, I'm going to be okay. That's really for a compliance reason. Yes. We're interested in being secure. Like you said, it has to start from the very beginning. Right. In your code, how you do your code. It's not just the hardware device, it's everything in your code throughout the entire process. And if you want to be secure, you want to be compliant, you don't act the same way.
Secure, well, that's right. I mean, being secure goes beyond compliance. Compliance is a motivator for security. But at the end of the day, if you want to truly service your customers, all right, you want to set up your security as a process and start it early. The whole compliance regime is to encourage that. That's how that works. So your point is very well taken. Yes, sir.
Maybe you guys can take this offline so everyone can have a chance to, set off if they want to. But just one final thing. Actually, two final things. Organizing these events takes a lot of effort, so I really also want to thank Haley, Naveen, Bart Shappy, Ashton O'Connor, and Arthur too. So thank you guys very much. So right now for member announcements, anyone wants to make any type of announcement, this would be the time to do so. You can just stand up and just talk loudly.
So my name is Eddie. I'm actually the community manager at Grand Central Tech. We are New York City's flagship accelerator, and we have just opened applications for our 2015-2016 class. We have a heavy focus on security for this class in general. We just announced our corporate partners: Google, Microsoft, Intuit, IBM, Pepsi, L'Oreal, and JP Morgan. And if you want more information on that, you can come see me after this. We offer unbeatable terms: 0% equity, 0% rent for a year. So we figure, what happens if you turn a New York City skyscraper into the densest point of tech innovation in the world? I think you can make a big difference. You'll have an in-house recruiting team to source talent for you guys. We have high schools, we have partnerships with colleges, so we are really building a legitimate community. If you want to come for a tour, or you want to get some more information, my email is eddie@grandcentraltech.com, or you can come see me after this.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Callie. I'm part of the committee that organizes these events, and I just want to vouch, Grand Central Tech is incredible, and if anyone does have pre-seed or seed company, you should definitely apply. I myself am looking for a product role, so if anyone's hiring for a product manager, talk to me. Thanks.
And I can vouch for Haley that she's very hardworking. Anyone else? All right.
Hi guys, I'm here with Keen Home. We're a startup here in town making connected devices for the home. So obviously, Internet of Things security is big for us. Our first product is a smart connected air vent, a lot like these guys actually. Take your old vents out in your home and put our vents in. We can intelligently adjust the airflow so you get temperature control at a room by room basis, kind of like a smart thermostat, but way more refined. We're looking for anyone who is interested in working in back-end software or embedded software, or full stack even, who wants to get into the Internet of Things space and work on at a cool startup here in New York. If you're interested in that sort of thing, come talk to me. I'll be around.
Anyone else? Only once? Only twice? All right, have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Dan.